Hello and welcome back to the Irish Mammy channel. We're in the polytunnel today. It's absolutely saturated outside. The rain is pouring down. You can probably hear it on the plastic of the polytunnel. It's been raining, it feels like, for weeks. And really all over the winter it's been raining. The whole country, the ground is just saturated. So I'm glad to have my polytunnel here to take refuge from the rain and still be able to get working away on the gardening. Not a lot done yet. I was in here prepping the beds and you'll have seen maybe some of that footage. So I have a good bit of work done. Still more to do, but the pressure's coming on for planting now. We're mid-March and nothing planted in the polytunnel really yet. I mean, I have garlic there on the end and onions. I have some leeks and shallots as well. And they've been there all over the winter. So really nothing planted as of spring planting just yet. So I'm going to make a start on it today. So we're the day before Paddy's Day, St. Patrick's Day here. Traditionally in Ireland it would have been, St. Patrick's Day would have been the marker for planting potatoes. Now in my area it's usually saturated at this time of year, the ground. So planting outside this early in the year is usually a no-no, unless you're very lucky to have a dry piece of ground. Mine certainly at the back of the house is definitely not dry enough for planting, and usually actually late April and even May sometimes is when I can start planting my potatoes outdoors. But thankfully this year I have the polytunnel and I have lots of space in my polytunnel this year. So the plan is to get some early potatoes in one of these beds. The variety I'm planting today is Charlottes. I've grown these for many years. They're a lovely potato in terms of texture. I think Irish people tend to prefer a dry, flowery potato. And most early varieties are actually a waxy type potato. But I'm finding the Charlottes that I plant, while some descriptions do call them waxy, they seem to turn out nice and flowery for me, and I'm very happy with the texture of them. And of course they come so early. I mean, I hope to have these the end of June, early July. So they're a welcome gift after maybe all my potatoes haven't sprouted in the shed at this time, or maybe even out. So far at the minute I still have potatoes. Other years though I have been long ran out of potatoes by the time the end of June and July comes. So I'd be very grateful for my early potatoes. And of course they're so versatile as well. Usually we're in hot, wet weather. The most we can hope for here. But they're versatile in that they can be used in salads as well and eaten cold. So that's also a nice bonus as well to my early potato harvest. I have grown potatoes in the polytunnel before. I did grow a small amount last year. This year I'm growing one of these beds on the side full of potatoes, so probably will get quite a good harvest of these, so they will last me quite a long time, so I can afford to plant the rest of my potatoes out later. Now this year I have a very special growing project. So this growing project started before Christmas and will be a late harvest in right in the middle of harvest season in August, and I intend to tell you more about that at the end of the video, so watch the video through for an exciting announcement. So because of this big growing project that I have at the end of the summer, I'm probably happier to plant my outdoor potatoes later for a later harvest in September, October. And because we generally don't get frost until early to mid-November, I can afford to do that. And I have done that in years past as well. So this year I'm deliberately doing it. Other years it's usually because I just don't get round to planting my potatoes until late. So I'm going to get on with this project today. I'm going to take you and show you the bed that I'm going to plant them in. So this is the bed I'm planting the potatoes in. I have them laid out on it already. I've had them sitting here for about a week. They were actually in the plastic bag, and if I had to be thinking right, I could have took them out of the plastic bag. So a lot of people will chit their potatoes, and that is a normal practice. I have never really got round to it. I've never seen an advantage to it, to be honest. I suppose one advantage is that they've already started to sprout, so maybe they grow up quicker in the ground. To me, that's not an advantage, because there's still a risk of frost when we're planting these outside in March and April and even into May. So I honestly think having them sprout out and grow out of the ground is putting them more at risk of frost damage. Now, a lot of the time, if it's only a light frost, you'll get away with it. It might nip back the foliage, and the foliage will just grow back again. But if it's nipped a certain amount of times and the foliage killed back over a couple of times, the tuber of the potato can run out of energy quite fast, and not have as much energy to put out more foliage. So while it might still grow, it could have less energy, and that is going to take from your crop yield in the end. So personally, I prefer to not bother chitting potatoes. And chitting, for anyone that doesn't know or isn't familiar with growing potatoes, is just leaving them out in a light place. A polytunnel would be ideal, or a sunny windowsill either, and allowing the light to get to them. Now, normally we're trying to keep the light from our potatoes so that they don't sprout, whereas the idea of chitting is to get them to sprout. Now, if you put potatoes under your press in your kitchen, more than likely you'll get sprouts, but there'll be big, long, straggly white sprouts, sprouts grown without light. Whereas what we want for chitting potatoes is green sprouts, so they need light in order to do this. Now, a chitted potato has a very short green sprout coming out of it, and you see them coming from where all the eyes were on the potatoes. Again, it's a choice you can make for yourself if you wish to do it. If you're in a different climate than me, then certainly it may be of an advantage to you. And possibly a colder climate would be better suited for chitting potatoes, so that you can have them chitting in an indoor area, and have that sprouting started to bring them on earlier when you put them in the ground, after the risk of frost. So it probably makes sense in certain climates, and while many growers around here will do it, it doesn't make a lot of sense for me personally. So you'll see them sitting here. I was up here yesterday trying to organise the tunnel a wee bit, and I took them out of the bag thinking, oh sure, I could let them chit, but didn't realise today I'd be up planting them. So I have still to make the holes in the Mypex, in the weed fabric, and I'm planning, I think I'm going to do like 20 seed potatoes in this area. It's roughly, I'd say 5 feet by 4, roughly. Might be a slightly bit bigger. So what I'm thinking in my head is 1 seed potato per square foot. Now, I don't particularly follow square foot gardening, but I do think of it as a guide sometimes when I'm trying to figure out how closely to plant things. So I'm going to get on with this, get the holes burnt into the Mypex, and get my potatoes planted. So I'm looking here at my potatoes, and I've had them sitting in this bag here, just in a plastic shopping bag. And there could be a week here, sitting in the polytunnel. And I didn't notice this yesterday when I took them out of the bag, but they've actually started to chit. So I hope you can see that little sprout there. And there is another one. I don't think you'll be able to see that one. There's another little one on the top there as well. So I guess they'll sprout in a plastic bag as well. While it's not normally something I bother with, just happen to have these potatoes chitted already. So these might look a little bit the worse for wear because they've been getting light, so they're green looking. And these are my own seed potatoes from my harvest last year. So I grew Charlottes outside. I did grow some Charlottes in the tunnel, but I also grew more outside. So this is the crop that I have grown outside last year. And that's perfectly fine to do for, I suppose you could use your own seed potatoes. I would say a maximum of 3 years. I have a gardening mentor, shall we say, who's years and years at this, and he's well in his 70s and a well-seasoned gardener in my area. He doesn't believe in using your own seed potatoes at all. He reckons he phrases it as they lose their power, but I think what he's trying to say is that they don't have as much energy in their tubers as the years go on. But I've certainly done it for 2 years. So I'll buy new seed potatoes and grow them 1 year, use saved seed from my own crop the 2 following seasons. So from buying seed potatoes for 1 year, you get 3 years worth of growing out of them. Now that's not to say you couldn't chance it for a 4th year as well. I just haven't, so I can't tell you how it goes, whether it's successful or not. But I can tell you it has been successful for 3 years for me. So this is my 2nd year using these seed potatoes. They were bought seed potato last year. And I fully intend to use them again next year. And one main reason, my main crop this year will be from my own seed potato as well. They can't actually be got this year because we've had such bad weather. A lot of our seed potatoes are grown across the continent in Europe, across the European continent, and they've had such wet weather all over last summer and autumn and now the winter as well, that a lot of them have had failed seed potato crops. So the particular main crop variety that I use is Carolus. It's an organic variety and it wasn't available from my usual suppliers this year. So that's another reason to use my own seed potato. And I'm glad that I had such a good crop that I still have plenty left. Not everyone will be in that position, and I can help out other people as well in my local DIY group. I'm able to supply some of them with Carolus potatoes as well if they want. That's how many I've grown last year. And let's face it, like any that I have left now, while yes they're still good for cooking and eating, they're going to soon start sprouting in the shed where I store them, and they get soft and just not as nice generally. So I might as well use them as seed potato. So for these, I planted, as you know, if you watched my videos last year, I planted through Mypex outdoors last year with a roaring success. I have to say it was really well worth the added expense of buying Mypex and the extra work of putting it down to have a weed-free garden over the summer. Now, there were still patches where the weeds came up through and around, but for the most part, I was not worried about weeds last year in my potato patch. And that is another reason for putting the Mypex on the beds this year here in the polytunnel as well. I'm trying to streamline it to leave it as easy as possible for me to grow and harvest and concentrate on the harvesting and maintenance of the plants rather than having to spend so much time weeding. I think any gardener will tell you the least enjoyment that they get from gardening is weeding, and to go out and weed an area and a few weeks later for it to be as bad again is quite disheartening. And when you have a large area to keep weeded, it's even more disheartening because the chances are you might not be able to keep up with it. Now that depends on what stage of life you're in and everything else, but I have lots of other demands in my time, and while sometimes it's lovely to get out and away from everything and just mindlessly pull weeds, usually all I can think of when I'm weeding is what else I could be doing if I hadn't let the weeds get so bad. So last year was definitely a success in terms of less weeds, and I learned some lessons, and will make changes this year. But I can say it has been so successful that this year I have implemented it in my polytunnel. As you know, last year I did have polytunnel space, but I only had about 5 beds. I shared the space with 2 other growers. This year I've moved to the polytunnel next door, and I have the full polytunnel to plant. So I've taken on a lot of extra growing space, as well as still having my areas at home. So I needed to make this as easy as possible. So I'm going to take you down and show you a close-up of how I plant these potatoes. It's not rocket science, but just in case anyone has not done it before, and I know as a beginner gardener it's certainly something I wasn't sure if I was doing right or not. However, I will always say, even if you're not sure, just plant it. It will grow. And you'll learn if it's grown funny or not grown a great yield, or whatever happens. If it's not successful or not totally successful, you will learn lessons and you can do it better the next year. One good thing about gardening, it comes around every year. You get to plant potatoes every year, you get to plant garlic every year, you get to plant all the things every season and learn from your mistakes. So I say, if this is your first season gardening, don't be afraid, don't overthink it, don't over research things either. Just get your plants or your bulbs or your seeds in the ground and let them grow, because the best experience you can get as a gardener is just putting the stuff in the ground, seeing how it reacts, and then learning from those mistakes. It might mean it could take 2 years or 3 years to perfect a particular crop, and in some cases it could take 10 years to perfect a crop. You know, I still struggle with some crops. Cabbages in particular I struggle a lot with. Mainly pest pressures is the problem with cabbages, but there is always something that we're trying to learn more on how to grow, no matter how experienced we are. So for those of you who want to see the detail, I'm going to bring you up close and show you how to plant a potato. I'm just going to do one close-up, and then I'll put the rest on time-lapse, because nobody needs to see me planting 20 something odd potatoes in slow motion. So I hope you can hear me over the rain falling. It might be very distracting in the background to have the rain falling, but it's actually quite peaceful when you're in here listening to it. So I'm just digging down. These beds are roughly about 12 inches deep, and then they just go into more solid ground underneath. It's not like there's any barrier in their way after the 12 inches of the raised bed. But early potatoes in particular do grow quite shallow roots. So rather than the roots diving down really deep into the ground, they tend to spread out laterally more so than grow downwards. Which is why actually early potatoes really do need to be mulched really well, because their roots grow shallow. As the potatoes swell on the roots, they kind of push up out of the ground. So you're more likely to have your wee tuber peeping up out of the ground and turning green, which for harvesting and eating is not desirable in a potato. So that's why it is very important to mulch these potatoes if you're just growing them without Mypex. One of the advantages to the Mypex is it acts as a mulch and they can't come up past it. So that's another advantage to Mypex or weed fabric, is to actually prevent your potatoes from turning green when they push up out of the ground. So back to business. So I'm going to dig a hole as deep as I possibly can with my trowel. I'll bring it even closer. So I brought it close up now, and I'm hoping to not shake the camera because it's sitting on the ground on the Mypex. So I've dug my trowel down, and this compost is quite loose, thankfully. So all I'm doing is trying to hold back my compost with my trowel, and so I've really dug probably the depth of the trowel, and I'm going to squeeze my potato in there, and I'm going to tuck it down. And I don't worry about what way I face the potato. Some people will tell you to face the sprouts or the eyes upwards, but plants are geotropic, I think is what it's called, where they'll, no matter what way you put them in the ground, they will send their foliage sprouts up and they will send their root sprouts down, because they instinctively know what to do. So I have the potato in there now. You can just see it there in the distance, and it's already started to cover over. Once I took out the trowel, the soil started to fall down around it. So I'm just going to tuck the soil over it that I've pulled back and make sure it is completely covered with soil, and just pat the soil down around it. And even though it is pushed slightly forward in the hole, and you would imagine it grows up straight, it's going to hit the Mypex. The foliage will make its way to the light and it will come out through the hole. So you needn't even worry about having it directly under the hole that's burned in the Mypex. The foliage will find its way to the light anyway. That's it. It really is as simple as that. As far down in the ground as you can get with your trowel, particularly because these are early potatoes, it's not as important to get them super deep. So roughly my trowel there, 4, 5, probably 6 inches in length. So there's measurements on this one and all, so you can roughly say they're 6 inches deep, and because they have the weed fabric on, mulching them as well, that will be helpful to them. I'm going to get on with the rest now. I won't go into that much detail on all the rest of them, I promise. Well, there we have the first planting project of the spring done. I have all watered in really well up there, and I am delighted to have the first thing planted out. It's an exciting start to the year. And I alluded to my very special growing project this year, and that will take priority over anything else, which is why I'm getting as much done now as I possibly can while I'm still able, because this is my very important growing project for the year. I'm expecting a baby in late August, early September, probably know my luck. But that will be the focus of the year for me. My videos and my garden will be the second priority for me for the year, but I still hope to keep making gardening videos as long as I can. So stay tuned for more planting videos. I'm going to do more videos now today. I have a nice block of time to spend in the polytunnel today, so I'm going to, rather than giving you an hour-long video of all the growing projects and all the planting projects, I'm going to spread it out over hopefully shorter videos if I can try and contain my waffling. So let me know if you started growing, if you've sown seeds, if you have planted out in your garden, if you're lucky enough to have a warmer climate than I do, or indeed if you're still waiting because you have a colder climate. Let me know your growing situation in the comments down below. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Follow me on Instagram as well for hopefully more frequent updates. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have learned something from this video, or if you have something to teach me, comment down below. I'm always learning. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.